I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and keep to the points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning application to a maximum of 4 minutes. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout this meeting. Thank you. Apologies for absence and substitution. I have apologies from Councillors Frost and Councillor Court. And I see no others. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just some clarification. Item number 1. It's written in the report that I have called this in. I'm not aware I actually called it in. I made a comment to the officer about DC might need to look at this. Well, it's in the text. Look at this application because of some policy issues. But I've not filled in any planning reasons or any form to call it in. And as a major, I understand this was going to come to committee anyway. So it's just that aside, I'm not predetermined on this, so I intend to take part in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Tomlin. Item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm happy to propose them. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Leeks. I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Item 5, applications for planning. Number 1, land at Redlands, Reading Road, Sherfield and Loddon. Greg or Phil, I think you're introducing that.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 1, which can be found on page 29 of tonight's agenda, is an outline application for up to 57 dwellings, all matters reserved except access and layout at land at Redlands, Reading Road, Sherfield on Loddon. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, which summarises the undertaking of the site viewing, provides an updated condition as a result of an amended plan, and updates the wording of a SIL informative. There's also a verbal update just to bring members' attention to the items listed in the recommendation to be secured by way of the legal agreement. Some of those matters cover both the legal agreement as well as the SIL matters. As such, it's recommended these should be removed from this section in the recommendation. The community facilities and education contributions would be covered by SIL payments and should be removed. The on-site open space is the multifunctional green space within the site, and the equipped play area is provided as part of this open space. The other matters raised in this point should be removed from the recommendation. And with regards to the playing fields, contributions will be provided if an appropriate scheme is identified as part of an outstanding consultation. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the signing of the legal agreement and conditions listed at the end of the officer report, as shown on tonight's agenda paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. If we could have our first speaker forwards, which is Councillor Darker. If you could come forwards, the Speaker's chair is effectively just in front of Councillor Vokes. And you have 4 minutes. I will remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the button is on the microphone in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm here to represent Sherfield on Loddon Parish Council and express its concerns and opposition. The first point is the world has changed somewhat since this application was submitted. Climate change, river quality, biodiversity are now very much more at the forefront of our minds. This is one of several potential applications for the area in the south of the parish of Sherfield. This application, like the others, will form an unsustainable development because there will be no local facilities and an inadequate bus service, which will force all all residents to own and use cars in order to access shops, surgeries, station, schools. And particularly concerning local schools and surgeries are all at the limits of their capacity, so people may well have to travel a very long distance. The second point is that access is off the current narrow access road from the Sherfield Park roundabout, which is a recipe with all the potential houses and cars for these possible developments for serious congestion, both at the roundabout and on the A33. The next point is that this development is right in the path of the incinerator plume and almost the first stop for that plume in terms of landfall. Next is the issue of this will contribute to Thames Water's problems with its inadequate sewage treatment works and cause further damage to the Loddon with polluted runoff. There is no provision for meeting climate change via heat pumps or solar panels. Last point, I think, is that the loss of good agricultural land and its biodiversity is a particular concern at the moment with the goings-on in Ukraine, which means we're going to need to produce our own food. Talk of mitigation in this application is, I think, totally hollow offers. Sherfield and Loddon strongly object to this development. It's against the neighbourhood plan, and there are no housing needs, urgent housing needs in Sherfield and Loddon to be addressed, and that was found in the neighbourhood plan. That completes my statement, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Darker. Are there any questions for Councillor Darker? Could you turn your microphone off, please, Councillor?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
No.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Darker. So you made a comment at the end there that this application is against the Sherfield and Loddon neighbourhood plan. Our report says that it conforms with the Sherfield and Loddon neighbourhood plan. What view do you have as to why you think the report says that it does comply or satisfy? Thank you.
Well, I think the loss of agricultural land was certainly something that was emphasised in the neighbourhood plan. The importance of not allowing ribbon and development and coalescence was emphasised in the neighbourhood plan. So it's against both those principles. And I was looking at the report last night, and it said that the view from the church would not be damaged. I think that's an extreme because it's on rising ground, and I think strategic views are very important, and it's sad to see these important ones in the south of the parish being lost.
Thank you. Could you turn your microphone off, please?
Yeah, it's not.
Thank you. Any more questions for Councillor Darker? No, I have none. If you could have a quick wipe down of everything you touched, the wipes are there. Thank you very much. And if we could have our next speaker, which is Paul Watson. Good evening, Mr. Watson. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. No, microphone's not on. It lights up red.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee and officers. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As the committee is aware, the site is allocated for residential development under policy SS 3.7 of the adopted Basingstoke local plan. The application proposes 57 new homes, with 40%, that's 23, being affordable in accordance with policy CN1. Your officer's report comments in the reasons for approval summary section that the proposal is considered to represent a sustainable form of development that would deliver part of the council's planned supply of housing and also, in the short term, contribute towards 5-year housing land supply needs. The proposal effectively forms an eastward expansion of the 150 dwellings granted at the site in 2017. It's been designed to utilise the already approved access from Taylor's Farm roundabout and to complement the existing layout. The application would deliver multifunctional green space in excess of the requirements set out in the Council's supplementary planning guidance. This has been arranged to the north, east and south of the proposed new homes, which would be retained to the west of the existing permitted housing. The area of open space surrounding the housing would provide a high-quality environment and outlook for future residents. It would also benefit the residents of the already permitted scheme and the residents of the wider area who would be able to utilise this space as a convenient circular walking route and access to the bridleway to the south and countryside beyond. The proposed density of the development has also been very carefully considered. This would be just over 20 dwellings to the hectare, reflecting the edge of settlement location compared to 24 dwellings to the hectare on the originally approved scheme. By way of context, and as highlighted in the officer's report, the development densities are much higher in Sherfield Park to the west, reaching about 40 dwellings to the hectare. The application is supported by a number of reports and detailed technical information to demonstrate how all relevant council policies and guidelines are being met. This work has been assessed by officers of the council, the county council and also statutory consultees. Again, your officer's report provides a very helpful summary. As you will note, no objections are raised by the council's planning policy team in terms of conflicts with planning policy or guidance. The urban design officer supports the layout and the housing officer endorses the mix and the affordable housing provision. No concerns have been raised by county highways or the council's transport officer, the environmental health department or the tree officer. The proposal is supported by the biodiversity officer as it would deliver an 18% enhancement of the site's current biodiversity value against the policy requirement of 10%. A sustainable drainage scheme has been designed and has been approved by the lead local flood authority, and no objection is raised on drainage grounds from Thames water.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. It is recognised, of course, that residents of the site would utilise local facilities, at least until the facilities planned on the neighbouring site to the south, policy SS 3.9, the County Council land, come forward. And so it's appropriate to provide contributions and SIL payments, as was set out by Philip in the update to the report at the start. And that's been agreed, and a legal agreement is well on the way to being drafted. So in general summary, it's very much hoped the committee will feel able to support the officer's recommendation. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak. And if I have the ability to answer your questions, I'll try to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could turn your microphone off. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Watson? Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just conscious that policy SS37 gives us a total number of dwellings of 165. We already have an extant planning permission for 150 on the books. Why do we need 57 when we've already got 150? We're already close to the 165, so why should we have a policy for that?
Yes. Sorry, Councillor. I think the policy, my understanding, it says approximately 165. And obviously the housing requirement in the local plan is a minimum. It doesn't set a maximum standard. The council at the moment is in a position where it doesn't have a 5-year land supply of housing, and we are in a position where you're taking forward a new plan and doing your call for sites. So we came to a point where this field was left over. It wasn't... It's not open space or performing a function as part of phase 1, and so we felt that it was reasonable to put it forward for consideration of development as it is part of the allocate site.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you. Good evening. In the policy SS 3.7 for the existing site, and obviously you're suggesting this is all the same site, it says to take advantage of the incinerators, combined heat and power. So can you tell me what you are planning to do? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Tomlin. This issue was raised on phase one as well because it is an element of the policy and it has been investigated by the sustainability consultants advising us on this. Their view has been that for a site of 150 or even with the additional 57 we're proposing, it's very difficult and indeed not really viable to go down that road at the moment. When there's a condition proposed on if this was allowed for a sustainability strategy to come forward, and that may involve other elements. If the county site comes forward in a reasonable time frame, which is the extra 450 houses planned below, that might make the combined heat and power coming from the incinerator something more viable to investigate. But on the levels of dwellings that we have at the moment, it's just not something that we could do. So we've offered other sustainability alternatives to meet your wider sustainability policies.
Sorry, so, and could you outline what they may be? Thank you.
Well, because it's an outline application, we don't have the detail. We've set forward various alternatives to do with PV, solar, air source, ground source type approaches. There's a condition proposed which says before any development commences, as you detail up the design of the houses, we have to submit a scheme for agreement before any development can start on site.
Any other questions? No, in that case, I have one. New estates always generate young families. Can you tell me where the children this generates will go to school?
At the moment, Chair, I believe they would go to the school, is it Sherfield Park to the west? There is a proposal, and this site was always seen as joined with SS 3.9 to the south, and there's a proposal for a primary school to come forward as that development comes forward. So I assume the Education Authority at some point would start switching children over and they would go to the new school to the south when it's built and available.
At the moment, that school doesn't exist, so where are they going to go to school immediately?
I'd have to look at what your education officer has said, but I believe it's Sherfield Park is the nearest. Okay. Maybe your officers could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. If you could have a wipe down, and if we could have our next speaker, which is Councillor Vokes. Good evening, Councillor Vokes. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm addressing you this evening as a Chinham Borough Councillor. I would like to focus on the issue of play equipment specifically. The Redlands development area rests within the Bramley ward, however it borders on Chinham, separated by the very busy major trunk road, the A33. Our current local plan includes the 150 houses currently being built on the Redlands site. Redlands, however, was intended to be built after the east of Basingstoke, which was planned in 2 phases with up to 800 houses with community facilities and a primary school. Residents on the Redlands site would therefore access the community facilities provided by the east of Basingstoke development. It made perfect sense. However, east of Basingstoke, planned to start in 2017, has not happened. There are no plans for it to happen as we sit here tonight. With fields on 3 sides and the A33 on the 4th, Redlands residents will have to access playgrounds and community facilities elsewhere. I have talked at length with officers about the provision of play facilities on new developments. While the planning proposal for these additional houses meets the NPPF requirements for play spaces and equipment, I would ask the committee's indulgence to think about the reality for people living in the development, in particular for families with very young children. The guidance says that required play areas for a development are based on occupancy rates, i.e. 0.5 of a square metre per person, excluding single-person dwellings. A LEAP requires a minimum of 300 square metres in an urban setting. 150 houses plus 57 houses only requires 248 square metres of play space, 50 square metres short to require a LEAP. There is also a requirement to provide play equipment within 600 metres of the dwellings as the crow flies. There is a LEAP only 89 metres away in Fox's Furlong in Chinham. However, there is the A33 to cross and private gardens blocking the route, so no access. The next nearest play area is off Gager Avenue in Sherfield Park. This is 386 metres away as the crow flies, so again it qualifies under the NPPF as being acceptable for Redlands residents. However, it is actually very close to, if not more than, 600 metres to walk. Residents have to walk down the spur road to the Taylor's Farm roundabout, which is quite a distance, cross the very busy A33 north of the roundabout via a pedestrian crossing yet to be installed, and walk along Gager Avenue to the recreational area.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. This may be fine for adults and older teenagers, but I'm concerned about young children and their developmental needs, which play areas provide. So while I can accept the principle, the 57 more houses at Redlands makes planning sense as set out in your papers, I am very concerned about the social welfare of residents living in this development, particularly families with young children. It will be a daunting prospect for them to walk to the swings and slides. I therefore appeal to the committee to consider making it a condition that the final design for the 57 houses includes a LEAP for residents, or apply a Grampian condition that these houses cannot be built until the community facilities in the east of Basingstoke development are accessible for residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Vokes? No, I see no hands. Thank you very much. Questions to officers? It's all gone quiet. Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just seek some clarity, please, from the officers with regards to this site. We've heard that this site in question is part of the Redlands site as set out in policy SS 3.7, which was 165 houses, of which 150 have been granted planning permission. So firstly, the clarification is therefore why 57 extra? And then the other part of the clarification I seek is the fact that the Sheila actually has this as site SOL 010, and it is down for 57 houses, but also says it's part of the existing SS 3.7 Redlands site. So it seems like we've got it counted twice in my book, but it actually, the reference, and it's placed in a area of sites that have issues, classification, and it says the site is available and may be achievable. However, although the site forms part of the current adopted local plan allocation site for housing of Redlands, both the local plan and the development brief SPD require the land to be maintained in its current use, i.e. agricultural, to limit the visual impact of the allocated development consented. The site's
Tomlin, could you ask a question, please?
Right, so the question is, please could you clarify why this is not reading in a consistent manner, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So as part of the site itself does fall in terms of the mapping for the allocated site of Redlands. In terms of the Sheila side of things, that informs the policy that was put into the SPD and the local plan. In terms of the rationale for the extra 57 on the site, currently we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. The weight attributed to policies in terms of allocation of houses within the countryside or on agricultural land has limited weight, or more limited weight. And as such, it comes down to a balance between what's proposed and the harms that may be attributed because of that. So yes, whilst ideally it may have been foreseen to be kept in agricultural land, given the current 5-year housing land supply position, there's limited weight attributed to those policies, and therefore in the balance it was considered that despite this, the proposal was acceptable.
If I could just add to what Philip has just said there, which is all perfectly correct. The first point to pick up, the site isn't in the countryside planning policy purposes, it's actually within the settlement policy boundary where the principle of housing development is acceptable. And the only other thing I was going to mention in terms of the Sheila, it notes a visual impact as part of a proposal for housing development there. And I think with any greenfield site, if you're going to develop it and put housing on, there's going to be a degree of visual impact, and it is, as Bill had said, balancing that visual impact with the any other harms and doing that tilted balance that we're required to do as a result of our lack of housing land supply, and balancing that therefore with the significant benefits that we've concluded on in terms of housing land supply and affordable housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. On page 37, against Thames Water, it says that Thames Water request a condition in relation to the foul water. Can I ask what that condition is?
Thank you, Councillor. We'll just look up what the Thames Water said on the application and we'll come back to you.
Sorry, my concern is that Thames Water have already put in conditions for the golf course and some fields because they don't have capacity for those developments. And I'm concerned that, that this may be an issue with the capacity, and it may scupper potential developments off for the rest of the potential developments in that area.
I can help with respect to the developments you're referring to in the southwestern part of Basingstoke, in respect to the golf course anyway. The upgrades to the existing network to increase the capacity wasn't to do with the sewage treatment works itself, it was to do with the pipe work between the golf course and the treatment work. So it's actually more central within Basingstoke where there are some existing connections that need to be upgraded rather than the works themselves.
Whilst Philip looking up those conditions, are there any other questions? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
I was hoping to ask whether we can feasibly take Councillor Vaux's suggestions on board regarding additional conditions, because my main concerns were around some of the facility usage. So if we can add those conditions or some form of those conditions, that would be ideal.
Yeah, in terms of the point that Councillor Oakley made in respect of whether it was possible to impose a condition to require that the development didn't commence until such time as the development to the south came online, then no, we can't do that because there's no certainty that that development to the south might come online. So you'd be imposing a condition that was unreasonable and ultra vires because there was no certainty that it would occur. So no, we can't do that. But in respect of the reason that one would want to do that, it's presumably, and listening to what was said, it's in respect of the infrastructure that is available at the moment. And obviously, Philip set out in the report and has commented at the beginning what will be delivered through a Section 106 agreement, but it's also is relevant that the developer will be required to provide community infrastructure fund payment, so through the community infrastructure levy that we have as a council. And just I've got the kind of headline document here. It just outlines that community infrastructure levy, or CIL, is a tool intended to secure contributions from developers towards improvements and enhancements to infrastructure required as a result of development. It's intended to supplement other funds to provide new infrastructure in the borough. It's not intended to provide the full costs associated with the infrastructure requirement. And it's to provide, the purpose of the levy is to give developers more certainty about costs and give councils and local communities more flexibility about how the infrastructure is funded. So there would be a not insignificant sum, by my very rough calculations, between £400,000 and £500,000 associated with the development to go towards community infrastructure in the area. And that's, like I said, a very rough calculation because we don't know the final sizes of the dwelling, so we can't actually work out that. And that calculation would come at the reserve matters. But then, looking at the community infrastructure funding statement, the last one, so for the last financial year, not the current year that we're in. There were a range of community facilities funded in part through CIL or through other mechanisms, and that included things like works to various community halls, including extension works. So there is a mechanism for delivering community infrastructure, which is our CIL process, which the council have agreed. So the condition that Thames Water have asked for is their standard condition that would require that the developer doesn't connect into the foul water network until such time as Thames Water have undertaken the works necessary to upgrade their own system. It's not, as I said, it's their standard condition. It's not something that they've identified the specific issue here, and it's not a normal scenario that we would impose such a condition because any water undertaker has a statutory obligation to accept wastewater from a development. That said, if members are particularly concerned that there is a significant issue here at this site, then that is a condition that we could look to impose if it's known to members that or felt to members that there is a particular issue there. So it would require Thames Water and the applicant to work together to make sure that the houses are built at the same time as the sewage infrastructure, rather than the houses not having any connection into that infrastructure, which obviously is you would expect it would always have anyway, and they've got an obligation to do. But if we can impose that condition if that's what members feel that they would like to do.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up back on the point that Councillor Howard Sorrell put forward, the play provision CIL contribution, could that be conditioned to be on the site? Because I didn't hear those words from you.
Yeah, of course. No, CIL is a separate process to the planning application itself. It's a levy, and that is it's towards community infrastructure generally, and then it comes to the council to decide how that would be spent. Actually, the play space is something that here is proposed to be secured through the legal agreement through a section 106. So they would have to provide play space as part of the development, and the play space officer is actually requiring that play space is within the multifunctional green space on the site. So that is natural play features such as mounding, stepping stones, logs, etc. So that's, as I said, it's a 106, so it would be secured through a legal agreement associated with the application should it be approved.
Any more questions? No? In that case, debate. Okay. Nobody's got their hands up. Oh, Councillor Goderson, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of points, if I might. I thought Councillor Darker raised some very interesting, which I'm sure everybody's taken on board, raised some very interesting points. One of the most significant one of which I think was that, you know, that life has changed since the time when this site went into our original local development framework plan as an acceptable, achievable site. Life is different now. Far more emphasis is being placed on the quality of biodiversity, environmental matters, the importance of chalk streams in general, and the Loddon in particular. I think the report here does make it quite clear that the vast majority of residents who live within this area through their various parish councils, Sherfield, Park, Chinham, Basing and Lichfield, have made it quite clear that for a variety of reasons they don't think this is a suitable site. The other point I would like to make is we've all read in the press of late the amount of times in which water companies have felt it necessary, which they are permitted legally to do under certain extreme circumstances, to discharge foul waste into rivers and into the sea, etc., etc. We're all aware of the fact that, sadly, in the current climate, with so many houses being built and so little money being put into additional infrastructure, that these sort of discharges occur more and more frequently. I would make the point that over the last 6 months or so, a considerable number of individuals have rung in objecting, and I've personally fielded a number of these, objecting to the smell of sewage going over the top of their houses, etc. And I would point out that not only is the Loddon itself very, very close to the edge of this development, but the discharge point at which the facility discharges foul waste, which in some cases foul, into the Loddon is again very, very close to this development. I think on balance I find it difficult to get used to the idea that this can be described as a suitable site for development. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not surprised that the usual lack of a 5-year housing land supply argument's been trooped out for the reason why we've got 57 units more being proposed over the 150 that's given permission and the 165 that was in policy SS 3.7. And, I get that. But then again, when you look back at the policies, they do give us a pretty clear steer. So just looking back at SS 3.7, it states in that policy that that development should respond positively to the landscape's quality, density, height and layout, should be minimise any visual impacts. It goes on to say, needs to present a green buffer to the north and east, locating development in the western part of the site. And further, that there should be joint master planning of the two sites, that and the site south of the Redlands, and it shouldn't be developed in isolation, specifically in that policy. So we wrote into policy very specific things that we felt strongly about the development of Redlands that were pretty clear at the time. And I don't see the arguments changing in that regard. There is a debate to be had about landscape, and the officer is very clear in the report on page 48 that there are landscape considerations that we should take seriously. And that officer does not support this application. And to begin with, they took a particular view. That view was obviously amended, but nonetheless those concerns remain. And those concerns remain principally because we are talking about the eastern part of Redlands. So either we were serious about policy SS 3.7 when we passed it, and I was there at the time, and I remember these policies as much as anybody else who was there at the time, or we're not. And if we're not, I would be very disappointed. If we are serious about those policies, that raises the issue of sustainable development and the development at the eastern part of the site. And in terms of sustainable development, we have a question to ask ourselves in regard to EM10, whether or not amenity that is being relied upon is truly accessible if it is on the other side of the A33, and if it is reliant on development that has yet to take place. As the officers have quite clearly said, we cannot take into account development that has not happened yet to rely on whether or not amenity is going to be provided. And as we are constantly told, we have to bear in mind what is in the red line. Here we have quite clearly a proposal within a red line that doesn't meet at the moment, in my mind, the arguments that amenity is being provided. It is being sought basically to be bought off. Here you are, here's an offset, here's a mitigation via contributions to things that we don't know about yet. So I think that whole argument around sustainability and amenity and EM10 is worth considering, and I do think the actual policy of SS 3.7 is worth thinking about very carefully, because it was so clear about how development would be acceptable in terms of Redlands coming forward, of which this is a part.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin, followed by... Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to hear some of these comments coming out. This is the whole crux of a lack of a master plan. We're talking of master planning. It's gone wrong when we've tried it. It hasn't worked. Looking at this layout that's in front of us here, I know it's a suggestion. What it shows is this site on the side of the existing site, and this side of the existing site, as far as I can see, has no landscape buffer. If you look at that red line to the left, there's no landscape buffer there. This site was always intended to be built on, even though our policy says it shouldn't be. It's got a little bit of landscaping there. So I find it all very, very unsatisfactory in that sense. It's very interesting to look at this site. This is on the far east of it. It's got no bus service without a long walk through the site to find a bus service, which is the famous number 14 bus service that serves everywhere every 2 hours and stops at 6 o'clock, and you have to commit half a day to use the bus. So that's sadly lacking. The only access is onto a very busy A33. The only shops nearby are, apart from the Nisa store in Sherfield Park, which is, I think, too far for people to want to even contemplate walking in this day and age, sadly. And then the Chinham Shopping Centre, and that is absolutely defined this as a settlement that relies on the car. I was disappointed to see we haven't got a great feeling about how we're going to look at our carbon future, but I understand this is an outline, so we can't discuss that at this stage. The landscape will be hit, absolutely. I think it's, again, contrary to our policies, which I think is quite clear. I take the 5-year land supply as the issue here. The lack of the play area, there is going to be a small play area, but all these people are going to want to go across the road to get to any play area, and the A33 is pretty congested at the best of times and is a particularly nasty piece of work at the moment with all the extra housing. The Thames water issue, that's very interesting. We know in other parts of the Bramley ward, Thames Water have actually said there are specific problems, admittedly not for this site, but there's something going on because they haven't given a quite clear answer in their normal fashion, saying just, yeah, get on with it, no problem. So there's something going on there. And I don't want to see these houses built and then tankers taking their sewage away because we're waiting for Thames to do their infrastructure improvement, which they say themselves takes 2 to 3 years once they've got planning permission. So I think we could build the houses far faster than Thames Water could actually deal with any issue. Then we've got the school. There is no school in Sherfield Park. The nearest school is 4 Lanes, or the Sherfield catchment school, but that's Sherfield Village perhaps, is Bramley. We have a big problem there. We have secondary school problems. People in Bramley, the final year at Bramley, cannot get their choice of secondary school. We are pressed in the entire area for schooling. So this development, you could argue, is potentially far too early, given the fact we haven't got these facilities or infrastructure in place. And also medical facilities. I mean, the Chinham practice is the nearest, and that is absolutely heaving. And I doubt you'd get anybody want to go to the Bramley practice. So again, I think in terms of sustainability side, there is a lot to be desired on this site. And then lastly, a pet subject, it was brought up, this particular site lies in a massive fallout area for the incinerator. And if one looks at the publicly available site, which takes the emissions data that is allowed by the incinerator's permit that was granted by the Environment Agency, some sophisticated modelling techniques now exist, and it shows, and in fact today it showed that the epicentre of the stack comes to ground just on this site. And when you look at that, taking the permitted development incinerator's output, for instance, that would be a 32 to 35% increase in oxides of nitrogen. So we have an interesting dilemma here that we are not getting suitable advice from our consultees, because they're not looking at it, and that's quite a serious problem. It's existent on Chinham houses already, but they were built way before the incinerator, and that was put out where it was, in a middle of nowhere effectively, because it's the safest place for it. To put houses underneath it is, I think, well, certainly I would suggest is irresponsible, but anyway. So I have a concern then about the pollution side of things. So basically on landscape grounds and sustainability, I would be quite happy to move this for rejection.
Thank you. And right, it's been moved by Councillor Harvey and by Councillor Tomlin. It's been seconded by Councillor Tomlin. I've got 2 more speakers. Sorry, other way round. Moved by Councillor Tomlin, seconded by Councillor Harvey. I've got 2 more speakers, which is myself and Councillor Freeman, but in the opposite order. But Greg wants to come in first.
I think quite a lot to digest there for members. Lots of good points. Just one thing I wanted to just correct first, or to just update on, was in respect to the discussion from Councillor Harvey in respect to policy SS 3.7 and the requirements of that. More to pick up on obviously policy SS 3.7 is a policy directly related to the supply of housing. And as a result of our lack of 5-year housing land supply, policy SS 3.7 is therefore out of date, so has reduced weight that we should be given to it. It's not no weight, it's just reduced weight, so members should be mindful of that in their final decision making. Obviously, I've heard the discussion in respect of landscape impacts, which is something that I mentioned earlier. And I've understood the discussion around accessibility and isolation and the facilities all kind of associated with that. There was discussion about the Thames water consultation, which I said was kind of their standard condition that they usually require, that it isn't normally imposed because they have legislation to accept the waste regardless. It's not a particular issue here per se, unless obviously members are minded to consider that a condition could be imposed. But I think that is something that could be just a condition rather than need to be a reason for refusal in its own right. In respect to schools, and I appreciate that was mentioned as part of the overall accessibility element, schools are actually part of the community infrastructure levy and would receive money or could receive money through that. Medical facilities obviously funded separately from the planning system, but again, understand that was all around accessibility. In terms of the fallout from the incinerator, obviously the applicant submitted a professional report with that that's drawn no objection from the Environment and Health Officer, and I think I'm right in saying there's no empirical evidence to the contrary to demonstrate that actually there is a significant harm associated with that, other than the comments that Councillor Tomlin's just made in respect of the research that he's been doing. So I'd caution against a reason for refusal there, unless it's known that there are contradictory statements to the professional evidence that's already been put forward with the application. And if that is the case, then it might be that that it could be considered whether it's insufficient information has been demonstrated or has been provided to demonstrate that it's a safe and suitable environment for residents in which to live. So yeah, sorry for the lack of brevity, but that's my comments.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. Just had my two penneth. It concerns me greatly, the lack of schools. We've already got 150 houses built on that site. There's no school there. There's no plans for a school there. Everything for the children to access is apparently across rather busy roads. It just doesn't seem sensible until, I mean, we see a lot of this at the moment where the houses get built and then the people in them have got nothing. They've got no schools to send their children to, no shops, no facilities at all. And I think we need to get away from building houses before we've got the infrastructure confirmed. And if the situation's changed since this sort of thing was planned in the first place in respect of things like schools, then I think we need to be looking again at it, because it just doesn't seem right to be putting more houses when they haven't even got the infrastructure to cope with what's already planned.
Thank you. Right, I think most people have had their say, except me. Councillor Howard Sorrell, if you go first, then I'll finish off.
Sorry, Chair, I had stuck my hand up earlier, but I don't think you saw me. There was a few threads from Councillor Harvey and Tomlin that I wanted to pick up on. Without wanting to preach too much, I would say that a lot of the applications we've seen regarding housing just barely meet the minimum standard for what counts as livable. That we might have standards in place that technically have been met, but the lack of facilities is staggering, bordering on sickening in some cases. Personal opinion, of course. Having said that, one of the things that Councillor Harvey mentioned was concern. Well, he mentioned quite a few concerns. We do need to bear in mind this is only an outline plan, so just because it's an outline plan for up to 57 houses doesn't mean 57 houses will be put in place. There's been concerns raised by quite a few councillors about the various facilities that would be used, but we, by refusing this, would be protecting people from options. People don't have to buy these houses, they don't have to move into and live in this location if they assess it to be unsuitable for their needs. Young families, if an important part of the house they're looking to buy is being close to a play park, they don't have to move here. Schooling is a big one, because that's obviously something that people look at anyway, and if there's no school places, again, that's going to put young families off. So we can't protect people from options just because we think they'd be unsuitable for the sort of people that might want those options, if that makes sense. And then in terms of what Councillor Tomlin said about the fallout from the processing facility, somewhere in this document it does mention that they're due to have an upgraded filtering system put in place at some point, specifically for odours, I think that was, but I'm sure that would protect against other issues as well. So I've obviously come down on both sides of it a little bit there, but just to play devil's advocate.
Thank you for your input. I've looked at this quite a bit and I've listened to everybody who's spoken, and most of the issues have been covered. By chance today, I was on the phone with Bramley School. There isn't a school in Sherfield Park, as has already been said. Bramley School is the local primary school. This summer, 59 children will leave that school. 6 of them have been given places at the catchment area secondary school. Only 6. The catchment area secondary school, which is Everest Community College, is full. The other 53 are having to go to non-catchment area schools. Some of those are 10 miles away. And the worst thing about it is, because those children are going to a non-catchment area school, the parents have got to pay for the transport at a cost of £90 per month per child. Is that what we want to impose on people who move into this development? And it will impact on other people in the borough. I think the impact of this on education around the Sherfield Park area is totally unacceptable. The other thing is, I've looked back at a planning application between Bramley and Silchester that went to appeal in late last year. I can't remember the exact date. And the appeal was refused. And it was refused because of 2 things. The inspector said that whilst Basingstoke has a housing shortage, that shortage is not acute. And secondly, he refused it because the development was reliant on the car. And I think from everything that's been said today, this development will be reliant on the car. So I think we've all finished on debate. So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour of refusal. I think that's unanimous. Officer, could you confirm, please?
Yeah, I will try and summarise that for you.
Please.
The first reason for refusal that I've noted down is in respect of the impact of the proposal not responding positively to the landscape qualities of the area, which I would suggest could be taken as being contrary to policy M1, EM10 and SS 3.7 in addition to the SPDs. And then the second being in respect of the site sitting in isolation by virtue of the being cut off by the highway network and a busy main road, and difficulty with accessibility to facilities, including medical, education, lack of bus services, lack of shops, noting impact from schools, including Bramley School and the wider catchment as well, again, contrary to policy SS 3.7 and EM10. 1A. Including 1A, not just limited to that, and in addition to that, the MPPF. And relevant SPDs, and all of that considered with all of that, it's considered that those harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, which are also acknowledged, but the harms outweigh them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Good. Number 1 dealt with. Item number 2. I'll have a very, very 30-second break whilst those people who are not staying clear the room. Okay. Application number 2, land at the rear of Poplars, New Road, Pamber Green, Tadley and Pamber. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 2, which can be found on page 72 of tonight's agenda, is a full application for the erection of 3 dwellings at the aforementioned site. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, which confirms the planning and agent has agreed the pre-commencement conditions listed within the report. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
And if we could have the first speakers, which is Mr. Fryer and Mr. Gill. Thank you. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
There you go. Okay. Right. So firstly, a few objections. First objection is on the lines of visibility. There's visibility of 42 metres left and right from 4.5 metres, 4.2 metres back from the road. This simply can't be achieved. Even if both hedges on the left and right were removed, there's still a large tree to the left and a telegraph pole on the right-hand side. I note there is a condition attached to the works for prior to occupancy, and I would strongly suggest this is changed to prior development commencing, as otherwise the applicant will end up with 3 houses built with no way of getting onto them or actually occupying the homes. The exit from the lane onto New Road is very difficult. You have to edge very carefully out onto the road. You cannot see any incoming traffic at all. The visibility is about 3 metres, if that, from the edge of the road. I've supplied videos and photographs of this junction via email to the planning officer requesting that highways measure the visibility, which as yet they have not done. The application was originally rejected due to the sight lines being incorrectly drawn, and this was simply redrawn with the lines on the correct side of the road, implying that the visibility was accessible. However, these distances are not correct, hence my request for highways to measure them and confirm prior to the application being granted. A historic application along the same land was also rejected, by my understanding, on the same basis of visibility. Given our ownership of the lane, we've not been consulted or given any permission to tarmac over the grass verges to obtain permanent access to the buildings. It is understood that the grass verges either side of the lane are owned by us, and therefore any changes would need to be agreed prior to the start of the works. The applicant has also not proved that he has the right of access for residential purposes. Flood risk. The application makes no note of Bow Brook, which flows on the north side of the applicant's land. This brook is not maintained in any way by the applicant, and instead the maintenance falls into our hands. It has to be continuously monitored and cleared to prevent localised flooding. There's been no flood risk assessment provided for the application, which is odds for the one application for Cosy Cottage, which adjoins the property, which are required to provide one. I understand the site is located upstream of a critical drainage area located at New Road, and therefore requires a flood risk assessment under local planning policy EM7. Photos and videos of the brook have again been sent to the planning officer, clearly showing the location and the volume of the water. Soakways are proposed for rainwater. However, the land is already saturated prior to any building works, and this will only increase the volume into Bow Brook and potentially lead to increased flooding. And one final point on waste collection. A condition is made that waste collection bins are picked up from Knights Lane. Knights Lane does not exist on any map that I've found anywhere near Pamber Green. So I'd like to understand where that is.
Thanks, James. Okay, thanks, James. So I'll just...
you have 1 minute.
Yeah. So I'm the owner of Rose Cottage, which is one of the properties adjacent to the lane that James was referring to. The site, just one point really around the sight lines again. The sight lines are drawn, requiring a setback of 2.4 metres. If that was achieved, that would basically need the removal of the hedge at the front of my property. It is a lovely hedge. It obviously forms security for my family. It is very well maintained and is a good natural habitat. And just to support James's point, we haven't been consulted with any solution for sight lines, and we definitely need something done prior to commencement development, not just prior to commencement of occupation.
If you could turn your microphone off, please. Questions to the speakers? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Based on what you've just said, I'm wondering, would you be happy for us to approve it with a condition in place that you be consulted in advance, or are you actively looking for us to reject this?
With respect to sight lines,
I think it just needs a proper consultation and agreement of what the solution is. Because when you look at, the obvious thing to do is take out a hedge which belongs to me. And I find it quite awkward to think that can be done without some sort of consultation or compensation. The other aspect's clearly more for James.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a condition in place that the sightlines need to be in place prior to occupancy, it makes no sense to me that you would allow the development work to happen prior to having those sightlines confirmed. Because if those sightlines are never going to be confirmed, which may well be the case, no one has ever measured these, as far as I'm aware, and proved, even with removal of elements, with potentially with consent on one side, but maybe not on both sides. If those sightlines are not achievable, all you're going to do is tear up that particular lane which is under my ownership without my consent, and for no reason whatsoever, because there'll be 3 houses there that are unoccupiable. And it just makes no sense to continue along those lines, in my opinion.
Councillor Leeks.
I was wondering if we could have a map of the area up, please, and perhaps the speakers could point out where they live. Oh.
Yeah, so if you follow, you've New Road on the bottom there on the angle. If you follow the red lines up, that's the lane in question. And myself, we live at Avondale at the top left. So if you continue the pointer up the lane, keep going up, and then turn left there. That after that blue shape, north of that is our property. So that's our property, and then the lane is in our ownership as well.
And then I live at Rose Cottage, which is there. So there are 2 properties adjacent, either side of the lane. Myself and Rose Cottage that have access onto the lane, and Poplars the other side of the lane, which doesn't have access onto the lane. We both have border hedges, totally parallel, and they do create, challenges around visibility. And I think as a community, we're concerned about having any more traffic up and down the lane. And to be honest, one of the most critical points will be during construction.
Yeah, which is why I'm suggesting that if there is a condition in place that the visibility has to be in place prior to occupancy, when construction is probably the most damaging and the most dangerous area, because you've got parking. I mean, that view is on the lane, on the corner. But if you come back 2.4 metres, you can see nothing. You can't even see that telegraph pole. But I've taken videos and photographs of that access to try and prove the point, and ask numerous times if someone can come and actually just measure and see if it's entirely possible or not, if this visibility can be obtained. But to put that off until building work has actually started is ridiculous, because at that point the accidents and issues around visibility will have already happened during the busiest period that lane will undertake, where 3 new homes are going to be built on it. It doesn't seem sensible.
Are there any more questions? Okay, I just would like to clarify. Are you saying that to achieve the sight lines that are drawn on the plans that are here, they would have to encroach onto your property and remove hedges which belong to you? Thank you.
Sorry, on both sides. So I think you've seen pictures looking at my hedge and pictures looking at the people the other side, and both of us are in the same position.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. If you could have a quick wipe down anything you've touched, I'm sure the next speaker will appreciate it.
Yeah.
And next speaker is Mr. Cotterill. Evening, Mr. Cotterill. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. Obviously, this application, as you've just heard, is recommended for approval, and over the time frames it's been taken to get to this point, it's 2 officers, and both were working towards an approval. The application hasn't had any objections in terms of from all the consultees, so in terms of the highways team and everybody else that's involved, biodiversity and so on. Obviously, the whole premise behind the objections that you've heard is about the access. The visibility displays themselves, as we've shown, the hedges do actually fall within the highway's owned land, which is, if you see on the screen, hopefully it can be put up, it's the pink area. Hampshire Highways basically have said that the ownership of those hedges, although they fall within their land, the maintenance would be falling to the adjacent landowners. Now, they all maintain these hedges, they're all trimmed and they're always looked after. But if you have a tree that's in somebody else's land that's overhanging onto your land, you're entitled to cut that back to your boundary position. And this is what we've discussed with the Highways Department in terms of how the visibility space could be achieved here. So we're saying that those hedges, they are on highways land, they're overhanging onto highways land, and although there may be an argument as to the ownership falling to the gents that you've just heard from, there is an agreement from the Highways Department to be able to trim those back and achieve the visibility displays as shown. Obviously, that's been agreed with with the 2 officers that were looking at this. Russell was one of them, obviously, before he left, and when Philip took this over. From a highways point of view, obviously, the Highways Department have said that there is no concern and no issues, and that they believe that these can be achieved. And I'll agree in terms of changing the condition to be a pre-commencement condition as opposed to a pre-occupation. The other part that I think is worth kind of pointing out at this point, you heard about there that we haven't obviously discussed this with the owners of the actual lane themselves. Certificate B was issued to the owners of Avondale, which is the owner of the lane, and I believe the chap you've heard from might have actually recently bought the house. I don't know if I'm right in saying that.
I've owned the house for longer than...
Anyway, yeah. So and in terms of the actual access itself, obviously it's used on a daily basis. If it was a major concern to the owners and the people that are using that access, why has it not been looked at before now? Why are these hedges being allowed to grow and cause a significant issue? And for those reasons, I think the officer has done a very good job in terms of what they've written in the report, and I believe the application should be approved, and I'll agree to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Cotterill? No, I have none. If you can write down, please. Questions to officers? No. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. If we could just clarify, please. I'm slightly confused here in the sense that the access, and I haven't heard that the access has or hasn't got permission. Is it, if you put a planning application down, do you have the right to use access? That is the question. If it's not in your ownership.
Thank you, Councillor. So the ownership of the lane and the use of the lane would be a separate matter in terms of having the right to access over it, separate from planning. They've demonstrated and served the appropriate notices, so in planning terms they can apply to do so. The agreement to then subsequently use the lane and have rights over it is a separate matter outside of the planning system.
Any more? Councillor Harvey.
So, logically then, you could build the 3 houses, have the lane that they can't use because of the description you've just given, and can't deliver the sight lines because of the description we've just had, the situation we've just had. But what would be stopping the 3 houses being built? Because you can give I guess you can give planning permission, but it can't then be deliverable in that sense.
I think first and foremost, and I think a point we heard from the objectors, but also from the applicant's agent, was around condition 16, which is a condition that seeks to achieve the visibility displays, and it was mentioned, I think, by both sets of speakers that that condition could be changed to prevent any development occurring at all until those visibility displays are achieved. So that, if members want to do so, that condition could be changed to read that no development whatsoever shall commence until sightlines of X, or 2.4 by 43 metres are actually provided. So that condition could be amended first and foremost, which would mean then the houses couldn't be constructed until the visibility displays were provided. In terms of actually constructing the houses, in planning terms, yes, they could be constructed, but it comes down to the ownership side again. I'd suggest that if somebody else owned the lane outside of the completely outside of the planning process, but if you owned the lane and you weren't going to let the future owners of those dwellings use the lane, then you also wouldn't allow the construction vehicles to use it. But that's quite outside of the planning system.
Just rolling through on the sightlines then, if that was allowed and the planning permission was approved, what's to stop the developer simply turning up, cutting the hedge and doing what they like because they've got planning permission? In a sense, does the owner have the right to say, it's my hedge, no, you're not touching it in that way? But they argue with them because, well, yes, I can because I've got planning permission to touch it.
Well, yes, they would be able to do so in planning terms, but I believe it would, Anne might be able to confirm, I believe it would, if you're interfering in somebody else's property, it's more it's outside of the planning system. It becomes a private matter, tantamount to trespass and damage to somebody else's property, so quite outside the planning system.
Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, well, on that particular score, the highways consultation, have they actually written down that the hedges are definitely on their land and satisfied us as the planning authority that they are on highway land, and therefore what you're saying is effectively permissible because they're it's an interesting one. The hedges, they're saying that they're not owning, is what I understand. The highways are not owning them, but they're owning the land. So is it a matter for the highways to enforce the removal of the hedges? That's where I'm really getting at.
I think, as I understand it, the roots of the hedges are probably not in the highway, but what's being argued is that there's overhanging of the vegetation of the hedge over the highway land, and that when that happens, there is a right to cut back the hedgerow so that it's not overhanging the highway land, and that's the discussions that they've had.
Councillor Hussey.
It was my understanding that highways would instruct the owner of the land where the roots, the trees were, the hedges were, to cut back the overhang. And where the owner fails to comply, then highways can cut back the hedges, and charge the owner for the work. The other private owner coming out of the private road, they wouldn't have the legal right to cut those hedges because they're not overhanging their land, it's overhanging highway land. So I'm a bit confused. Can I just I want to turn this to a question. Part of condition 16 says such sightlines shall thereafter be retained for the lifetime of the development. Well, that's a condition on the applicants and the people who buy the houses. But I don't think they will have the right to do so. The condition has to be on the county council to enforce the owner of the hedges to cut back. So I am totally confused. I may have contradicted myself in that, by the way.
I think you're right, Councillor Hussey. The Highway Authority has power under the Highways Act to serve a notice requiring it to be cut back.
In which case the condition.
Right. Yeah, we can. The application is made on the basis of having a particular red line around it, and land ownership is not relevant to that. So part of the requirement is to provide those visibility displays and to ensure that the development is appropriate. Those visibility displays have to be provided and retained, and that would be for the Highway Authority to maintain.
That's a condition. Sorry, that's a condition on the Highway Authority.
Yeah, there's a condition requested by the Highway Authority as well as for the Highway Authority.
As I said at the beginning of this meeting, there is no public speaking once it's finished. So, sorry, it's not allowed. Any more questions to officers? No, in that case, debate. Councillor Leakes.
Excuse me, Chair. I actually wonder whether we'd benefit from going out and having a look at this, because I don't know if anybody can remember a few years ago when we had a similar development, well, not a similar development, a development on West Street where hedges were in the way and people could not see coming out of the two, I think it was, houses there. And we went out and looked, and you could actually see the problems then. I can't make my mind up about this tonight. I think it'd be beneficial to go out and have a look at it sometime.
Thank you. Is that a proposal?
I'm happy to propose it if I can get a seconder.
Councillor Freeman.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded for deferral. Those in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Officer, if you... And if we can clarify who the condition would be on to maintain that sight line as well, because it does appear to me that the condition as written is that the occupants of the houses have got to maintain a sight line, which they might not have the legal right to do. So we do need to sort out the legal situation as well. So, Greg, if you could confirm, or Philip.
Thank you, Councillor. So that item has been deferred to allow for a site visit to be undertaken before being brought back to committee. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just confirm that because there's some speakers here, they won't be able to speak again at the deferral meeting, will they?
No, they won't.
Yeah, that's correct.
Public speaking has finished and will not be reinstated. Thank you. Item number 3, land at Yew Tree Cottage, Mount Road, Highclere. And if the officer could introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 seeks outline planning permission for the erection of 3 two-bedroom starter homes on land at Yew Tree Cottage, Mount Road in Highclere. The application is outlined with all matters reserved. The application has been accompanied by an illustrative layout plan and visibility display plan, and it's indicated that access would be shared with the existing property, Yew Tree Cottage. By way of update, the update paper summarises the member site visit, and it's also confirmed that agreement has been received from the applicant in regard to the recommended conditions, which start on page 128 of the main agenda. And the application is recommended for approval, subject to those listed conditions.
Thank you, Gemma. We have no speakers on this one, so we go straight to questions to officers. No, I have no questions, so we will go to debate. Councillor Howard Sorrell, followed by Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Applications like this are sorely needed. Starter homes are an excellent idea, especially in areas such as this. So, with respect to Councillor Faulkner's opportunity to speak, I'm happy to submit a motion to approve.
Thank you. It's been moved for approval. Do we have a seconder? No seconder. Okay, we will continue for the time being. Councillor Faulkner, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as it says in the update paper, it was important to see this site because it is a very small site, and therefore three dwellings on that site needed to be, I suppose, understood. The access is a right angle into the site, so you would have 4 dwellings using quite a narrow site. And what didn't come through in the papers, which it says in the update, is the fact that there are 3 schools very close to it. And Mount Road is a nightmare, and I've spent a couple of years with the schools on other issues, so nowhere was that highlighted. So I suppose I'm highlighting these issues rather than expressing an opinion on them.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to page 121, where it talks about the fact that this is an outline application, but I believe it's an illustrative layout where it shows a garden size in the middle plot is below our standards. It's less than 10 metres in length and it's less than 50 square metres. It then says, but it's an indicative plan and it may well be accommodated with the reserved matters. Can we condition this, if we grant approval, that this is a condition that the garden has to be provided to meet our SPD? Would be my request on that.
We had actually moved into debate, but we'll take the question anyway.
I don't think it would be appropriate to put a condition on it in isolation. It in itself would be considered at the reserve matter stage as part of the overall consideration of the layout, and at reserve matter stage, if the standards weren't met, it might be that in itself was a reason for refusal in that regard at the time of consideration. But we could perhaps put an informative on any decision that was made tonight, just to make the applicants aware that as currently illustrated, there are shortcomings in that provision, and to encourage that any reserve matters application does meet those standards from the outset.
Councillor Tomlin.
Basically on that, okay, can we then consider the informative as described? Yeah.
Councillor Freeman.
Well, having had the benefit of going on the site visit, it does seem rather a small site for 3 houses, and the access does seem to be a bit dangerous. I'd be happier if there were only 2 houses on there. I really do think it's a bit of an overdevelopment of the site as it stands, and the access onto that road, and the fact that, from what I understand from other councillors, it's rather a busy road, and I do think that 3 houses on that small plot is rather too many. I'd be happier to see 2, but yeah, 3 is too many, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Likewise, I looked at that site and went, 3 houses? Really? I don't think there is a major problem with the road access. I think that is not ideal, but I've seen a lot worse. We are in the situation right now where we have a proposal without a seconder.
It's fallen, Councillor.
So the proposal falls. So is there anybody who would like to make an alternative proposal? Councillor Freeman.
Can I propose to refuse this planning application on the grounds it's an overdevelopment of the site?
Thank you. And is there a seconder? Councillor Tomlin. Thank you. Moved and seconded for refusal on grounds that it is overdevelopment of the site. Those in favour of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I'll make that 9. Yeah. 9. And those against refusal? 1. Thank you. Gemma.
So just to clarify that application has been refused due to 3 dwellings comprising overdevelopment of the site. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just confirm that would be Country Policy EM10 of the Basingstoke and Deane Borough Local Plan and the Design and Sustainability SPD. Thank you.
Item number 4, land at OS grid reference 466203 145726, Scratchface Lane, Heriard, Basing and Upton Gray. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 4, which can be found on page 139 of tonight's agenda, is a retrospective application for the change of use of land from agricultural and equestrian to use as a dog training facility at Scratchface Lane, Heriard in Hampshire. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
And if we could have our first speakers, and that's Mrs. Hill and Mr. Wills. We don't appear to have a Mr. Wills. So, Mrs. Hill, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Mr. Wills has COVID, so he's unable to be here tonight. I speak in objection. I'm a resident at Manor Court, one of 3 houses directly on Scratchface Lane. All 5 households at Manor Court have objected to this planning application. We live on a quiet country lane used by farm vehicles and low-level traffic to offices and a cheese factory. The site is located within open countryside off an unmade track and has a quiet, rural and sensitive character, as noted by the planning officer in his report. During the spring and summer of 2020, during the first lockdown, we noticed prolonged barking from the site. If we hadn't noticed the noise, we wouldn't be here objecting. The sound of dogs barking carries. It was a repetitive noise that spoilt the amenity that we all enjoy living in this location. This was confirmed by the noise survey that was independently commissioned by the residents, who state in their report that in their professional opinion, noise from dogs barking during the use of the proposed training facility would be clearly audible at the location of nearby residential properties. Not only that, but the increase in traffic was significant. I support farmers diversifying. The tenant has agriculture and horticultural enterprises in Heriard, which the residents are fully supportive of. In past years, and recently since the dog training ceased, there have been sheep and horses grazing at the site, which disclaims the applicant's statement that the field is no longer viable because of ground conditions. There are also currently 4 beehives in the corner of the field. These uses are in keeping with the character of the area. The sound of multiple dogs barking and increase in traffic is not in keeping. Dog training brings in people from long distances outside Heriard. It only provides a fixed rent to the tenant, and we don't believe this to be the right location because of the proximity to residential houses. Contrary to the planning officer's report, I believe this proposal doesn't improve economic, social or environmental conditions to the area, nor is it sympathetic to the visual quality. It can't have passed the councillor's notice that all the objectors to the application live locally within a mile of the site, whilst all the supporters live outside Heriard. The closest supporters live in Alton and Basingstoke. Some are as far afield as the Isle of Wight, West Sussex and Worcester. Travelling over 200 miles to train your dog is surely not something this council should condone, especially having declared climate emergency. The supporters of this application cannot pass comment on noise disturbance because they don't live here. Basing a decision on these views fundamentally undermines the nature of local consultation. In the officer's report on impact of the character of the area, that equipment would not be permanently in place. The equipment consisted of a number of bright coloured plastic items for dogs to climb over, including 2 large red and yellow Wendy houses, which were never put away previously. If the proposal is approved, could this be an additional condition that the equipment
You have 1 minute.
put away? I note that conditions 3 and 4 state there is insufficient detail included in the application. I would question how the application can be approved when the planning officer has acknowledged insufficient information. If the council are minded to approve the application, I request that condition 5 be amended to reflect the planning officer's report in highways and parking to include the phrase, and there shall be no more than 3 training sessions per week. In condition 6, the number of hours of operation, the planning officer suggests 9 till 7, 6 days a week, and 10 till 4 on Sundays and bank holidays. I'd request the hours of operation be further restricted to 9 till 6, Monday to Friday, and 10 till 3, weekends and bank holidays. In summary, I believe the change of use would have a detrimental impact on the character of the area and would cause harm to the amenity of nearby properties. I therefore encourage you to reject the application.
Thank you. Questions to the Speaker? No, I have none. Thank you very much. And you're already doing the wipe down. And do we have a Mrs. Hooper here? No. In which case it is questions to officers. No questions to officers. Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, me again. Question on the noise survey. Can you give us a quick précis of the sort of levels of noise that were presented? Well, I see there are 2 reports, and whether they were substantially at odds with each other, please.
We can give you the content that's in the committee report, which obviously does the overall assessment, considering sort of setting out the report from the applicant demonstrates that the impact could be accepted, it wouldn't be significantly harmful, and that was the view reached by the Environment and Health Officer, whereas the objector report obviously suggested there would be an impact, but as I say, the Environment and Health Officer has reviewed both of those reports and concluded that the proposal wouldn't be significantly harmful to an unreasonable degree to residential amenity. Phil's just managed to find those levels as well. I'll let you read those out.
So the assessment undertaken by the applicant's noise consultant states, for the assessment, the worst case sound levels will be used. They occurred during 3 minutes to 11 with a max of 94 decibels and an LAEQ of 67 decibels. The camera shows the source is a handler shouting and a dog barking with a maximum of 2 meters from the sound level meter recording device. At 10 metres, this would equate to 80 decibels. As outlined already, both reports were reviewed by the Environmental Health Officer, and who's come back and not raised objection on the basis of the reports.
Thank you. Any more questions for the officers? No? In that case, debate. Okay. I'm looking at page 142, and I see no objection from the landscape officer, no objection from environmental health, subject to the conditions. I'm assuming the conditions are included in the those conditions are included in the recommendation. In which case, I move the officer recommendation for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Howard Sorrell, thank you. Moved and seconded for approval, subject to the conditions that are in the report. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll make that 8. And those against? 2. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. The application has been approved, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
Item number 5, land at Mount Meadow, Paintings Lane, Highclere. And Sue, if you could introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of a detached 3-bedroom dwelling with a detached double garage on land at Mount Meadow, Paintings Lane, Highclere. There's no update and the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. Do we have Christine Clark? Good evening. You have 4 minutes. I will remind you when you have 1 minute remaining. The button's on the deck in front of you.
Thank you. My name is Christine Clark and I'm here this evening to address the committee on behalf of myself and my husband, Christopher Clark, in support of our application. We have owned the land at Mount Meadow, Paintings Lane since 1982, a period of 40 years. In the past, we have reared various farm animals, but due to the small-scale enterprise, it proved to be uneconomical. During that time, the barn was used for the storage of hay, straw and fodder. However, it is a number of years since these activities took place and the barn is rarely used today. More recently, we have turned our minds to the global need for conservation and our carbon footprint. The land we own covers approximately 4.5 acres, and we've been planting trees, hedgerows and creating ponds. When trees have fallen, we've built log piles for hedgehogs and insect habitat. We are happy with making provisions for owls, bats and birds. Our intention would be to maintain the existing countryside setting and enhance wildlife wherever possible. I was born and lived in Highclere throughout my childhood. Both my husband and I attended local schools, Walton Hill Primary School and the Clear. Sadly, my parents have both passed away, but Chris's mother still lives in Highclere. As a child, I would walk to school every day. The journey from Crowshot Highclere to Walton Hill School is a distance of about 1.5 miles. I would walk via Tubbs Lane and Paintings Lane, and I've watched the village grow from sparse ribbon development to the vibrant village it has become today. Much infill has taken place over time. With this in mind, we wondered whether it would be possible for us to build a home and live in Paintings Lane. Replacing the rusty, unused barn with an attractive home would move us closer to Chris's mother and to our childhood homes. Prior to our pre-planning approach, we spoke to our neighbours at Ashridge and the Croft, and neither of them had any objections. Since submitting our full application, you will note we have reduced the size of the original proposal, hoping it sits more comfortably in the rural setting. We have also enjoyed village life and contributed to the local community. As children, we were both members of Highclere Church Choir, and I still enjoy singing with Berkeley Church Choir. I work as a guide at Highclere Castle and can trace family connections back through more than 5 generations.
You have 1 minute.
We have reached a time in our lives where it would be much easier to maintain the land
if we were to move back to Highclere. Therefore, we hope you will give our application consideration. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Questions to the Speaker? Councillor Tomlin.
Good evening. Is it Mrs. Clark or Ms. Clark? Sorry, is it Mrs. Clark or Ms. Right, Mrs. Clark, sorry. You made a comment about you were aware of your carbon footprint. What are your considerations in building this house? Are you going to be encompassing, wherever you can, carbon sort of zero policies?
Could you put the microphone? Yeah.
Sorry, we have arranged for the garage to be turned 180 degrees so that it's got a south-facing roof, so we can put solar panels on the garage roof. And we're also intending to use air source heating, which reduces the carbon footprint.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you very much. If you can have a wipe down. Right. We only have the one speaker, so questions to officers? No. Late. Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite remarkably for that part of Evingar, there's been support, and as opposed to more often it's objections. The parish council, who can't be here tonight, have not raised any particular objections, and of course in that area people are concerned about what might happen in the future, which is not of any concern for planning. So I would actually be happy to propose acceptance of the approval.
Thank you. We've got a proposer. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tomlin. Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, that's everybody. 100%. Thank you. So, could you confirm the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. That the application is approved subject to the conditions in the agenda paper.
Yeah. Right, item 6, Pit House, Mount Road, Highclere. So again.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the erection of a detached 4-bedroom dwelling and double bay carport with a new vehicular access onto the Andover Road on land at Pit House, Mount Road, Highclere. I'll draw the members' attention to the update paper where you have the viewing panel report. And also there is an update there with regards to Highclere Parish Council's further comments. They were unable to send someone to the meeting tonight, so they've asked us to just repeat their comments that they've provided. It's what their representative would have said at committee, so they've made some further comments there in terms of the application. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Sue. Could we have Mr. Leeson, please, to the speakers table? Good evening, Mr. Leeson. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, thank you. This is a statement on behalf of the 3 surrounding properties, Briarwood House, myself, Dove Cottage and Pit Cottage. We have 2 primary concerns, the access to the A343, speed and privacy. Number 1, speed. 90% of Andover Road in Highclere is a 30 miles an hour zone. As you exit the north of the village, it increases to 40 miles an hour on a straight piece of road heading down the hill for the remaining 300 metres. Residents have been in dialogue with the Parish Council and Highways regarding this. When vehicles pass the 30 to 40 miles an hour sign, they accelerate. The proposed driveway is located approximately 150 metres past this 40 mile an hour sign on the downhill slope, which we feel is dangerous. The concern is multiplied during Thorngrove School drop-off and pick-up times. On the 4th of June, Highways stated that the visibility sprays of 2.4 by 120 metres were required for 40 miles an hour. The original proposal was only 103 metres. Vehicular Consulting, 12th of August, responded, quote, to address this marginal impact, it is proposed to raise the access drive by 400 millimetres on the approach to the interface with the A343. Whilst artificially raising the access by 400 millimetres, considers a driver exiting the driveway, it does not resolve the issue of visibility for vehicles on the road itself driving up the hill turning right on the proposed driveway. Indeed, this was the cause of the accident in 2018, as per Vecchio's comment, quote, "The incident appears to have involved a car turning across the path onto an oncoming vehicle. Significant damage was caused to the exterior wall of the Belghetto property just to the south, a likely output of a high-speed collision." Number 2, privacy. Our first comment is that the loss of privacy isn't just from inside the properties, it's impacts of privacy to our gardens as well. Pitt Cottage believe that the height of the proposed and surrounding existing properties is less relevant in context to the land contour. Pitt Cottage is placed on higher land, and both its ground and first floor will have loss of privacy from proposed property's first floor and converted roof space. Shared boundary of maturity of landscaping between Pitt Cottage and the proposed development is stated incorrectly. Deciduous beech hedge of only 2 metres height with 1 metre fill in area of 15 months maturity from purchase of land from ownership of Pitt House. Briarwood House, myself, agree with this contour versus the height of the houses. The new development sits much higher looking down over Briarwood. This will create a reduction of light into and will not safeguard current living conditions. Both roof heights document 1st of the 12th 21 and the committee report 28th of the 2nd, there will be no overbearing impacts on the occupants of Briarwood House. Make no reference to the trajectory or grading of the land impacting the natural light into Briarwood House. The deciduous nature of much of the tree line and hedge means that in the autumn, winter, spring months, when the trees are not in full leaf, additional light is able to come into the property, which will be impacted.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Final 2 comments, impact to biodiversity. Proposed development will require removal of substantial hedge that runs east-west, Pitt House versus Pitt Cottage in the plot, as the broken line in site outline of location plan. This is a natural structure of the site and removal will be of ecological detriment. There's increased national awareness of hedges that should be removed. Final comment, the statement in the design access statement included in the application that this quote, development is locally supported. Based on the number of objections and supporters that are not impacted, we do not believe that statement is true. Thank you.
Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Gaskell.
You mentioned the access off the A343. Can I just ask, Dove Cottage, does that have access off the same road?
Yes, it does. Approximately 20 to 30 metres further south.
And do they not suffer from the same issues that you just outlined?
We do, but that driveway was approved, I'd have to look at the records, approximately 30 years ago, when the traffic was quite different.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Leeson? No. Thank you very much. If you can turn the microphone off and you're already doing the wipe down. Thank you. Mr. Left. Good evening, Mr. Left. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors and officers. Thank you for coming to visit our proposed new house and giving us the opportunity to present the merits of our plans for your consideration this evening. I'd like to commend Ruth Sheepshett's report and thank Ruth and Bethan Wallington for their work to provide a very thorough and impartial analysis of our proposed new house. We love our home in our beautiful village and are excited to create a family house that can nestle gently in our leafy garden. We bought our house to be near my wife's family and return to the village she grew up in. We were lucky enough to find Pitt House and received your permission to gently modernise this locally listed property. We believe we have created a wonderful family home to bring up our children near their grandparents and surrounded by wonderful mature trees. However, my own parents live 100 miles away near Birmingham and struggle to participate in family life as much as they would like. Eventually, they will need our help as they get older, so we hope that they will be able to move in to live with us at this new house. This means we'll be designing a lifetime home, making sure access is wide enough for walking frames and my parents' requirement for a garden room.
but suitable long-term for family use with a work-from-home study. There have been some concerns about the impact to trees from our proposed new house. Preserving the beautiful setting of our home is of paramount importance to us, just as much as it is to our neighbours. We have therefore secured expert advice from Jason Trewinard, our arboricultural consultant, who until recently was the tree officer for West Berkshire Council. Jason has analysed the plans and trees, designing a build approach to ensure we do not disturb roots and protect leaves and branches from dust and building work. Additionally, as per the preconditions, building will be done at times to avoid disturbing wildlife and neighbours. As Ruth notes in her report, the new house would not result in undue loss of privacy or cause undue overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing or noise and disturbance impacts to the neighbouring properties. As per the site description offered in the report, it is bounded by mixed hedgerow and some mature trees with no preservation orders that shelter the impact to neighbours and make the new house and its garden a private space. We have additionally located the house closest to the boundary with our home to ensure the maximum distances to the neighbours, and as observed in Ruth's report, made sure the roof height is comparable with the surrounding dwellings. We'll be building the new house ourselves. We have done a sensitive job of maintaining and improving our locally listed home in the village already, and hope we have proven we can be trusted to build sensitively for the benefit of all. The land proposed for the new home is on a large section of garden not required. Having followed the Highways Agency guidance, we can create a new use for this garden space to support my parents in their old age.
You have 1 minute.
We have employed detailed three-dimensional surveys and highway advice to ensure we can make a safe entrance to the new house, delivering in excess of the required sight lines. The entrance to the new house is wide enough to have visitors pull in and out at the same time and provide room for the safe presentation of bins for collection. Before and after my parents move in, we are pleased to add a new family home to the village. In line with letters of support for our application, we have found there is a lack of stock for young families in Highclere. So much so, my wife had to close the Highclere Church Nursery group she used to run due to a lack of children. Perhaps new renters might restart the church nursery or support the marketing of the village facilities as my wife does for the Westridge studio. We are grateful to Ruth and Bethan helping us make sure the new house will be built in the best way possible and look forward to working to close out the 22 preconditions that have been set for us to ensure the best outcome for the people and the wildlife. We therefore sincerely hope that you will grant planning permission in accordance with the recommendation before you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, I've got one on the access. Are you putting gates on the access, and if so, will they be set back far enough so that a car can pull off the highway whilst the gate's open?
So as mentioned in the report, if we do put in gates, that will be a separate planning permission. The expectation is that they would be set, if ever, sort of at the top of the driveway, very far back from the road.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. If you can turn the microphone on and have a quick wipe down, that would be appreciated. Questions to officers? No? Debate? It's all gone quiet again. Councillor Faulkner, sorry, you're just out of my sight line over there.
Yeah, the parish council sent out their email just a couple of days ago, and sadly they can't be here. In many ways, what the objections come down to is the access, because there are two other houses below that on the down slope, but they were built many years ago. I mean, I've been in the area 40 years, and in that time, once the Newbury bypass opened, we get all the traffic from the industrial estates of Andover going up to the Midlands. So the volume and size of traffic has increased massively. And the record 500-600 yards further south from that, the record on the speed indicator device is 106 miles per hour in the 30-mile-an-hour limit. And that was a Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. You can guess that's motorbikes, but it does indicate that, sadly, that stretch of road is a bit of a problem, shall we say. So I think in your considerations, that's probably the main issue.
Thank you. Anybody else for debate? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Oh, I completely understand, but there are definitely things that can be done, like you can put signs up that say hidden turning or something like that, just to slow people down a little bit. And the only way the speed limit would ever change here, presumably, is if more and more access ways into driveways are built, which would be a solution to the problem. Just move the 40-mile-an-hour limit after all the driveways. Currently there's, I think, 2, so a third one, maybe that would make more of a case for the Highways Agency to shift the limit. So I don't see it as a huge problem, because I think it might solve itself in time, or might be solvable with minimal effort. So.
Before there's a vote, can we add an extra condition?
Sorry?
Before there's a vote, can we add an extra condition?
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else for debate? Okay. I looked at the site with some of the others. My only concern would be the access, but there is no objection from Highways, and with no objection from Highways, I can't see any good reason to recommend refusal. So on that basis, I move for approval. And the seconder will be Councillor Tomlin. Before we take a vote on it, Greg would like to recommend another condition.
Yeah, just born out of some of the questions there. I noticed at condition 17 there's a requirement for the new access to be surfaced with non-migratory materials for the first 6 metres, but obviously there's a question in respect of whether there would be any gates. So I'd like to add a further condition to that verbally, that there shouldn't be any gates within the first 6 metres. Thank you, Chair.
I'm quite happy with that condition, so it's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, that's everyone. Thank you. Sue?
Thank you, Chair. That the application be approved subject to the additional condition that no gates are provided, and that the gates have to be provided at least 6 metres back from the highway.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you. Sorry, just on that aspect about the gates, in saying that, are we accepting that gates could be there? Because I have a concern that if you pull in with your car and you can't go through the gates, then you're going to have to reverse out onto the road, which causes implications in itself. So I just wanted to know if that, in saying that gates have to be a certain distance back, are we accepting that gates are okay?
Gates could be erected under permitted development without a condition. They could be up to 1 metre in height on the back edge of the highway. The 6 metres is the distance that the highway authority recommend to ensure that there's suitable space available for a vehicle or 2 vehicles in this case, to be able to pull in before you get to any gates. So that's the reason why.
That doesn't address my concern. That doesn't address my concern with reversing back onto the main road if you can't get through the gates.
There's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is under permitted development, you could erect gates at the back edge of the highway up to 1 metre in height. So 6 metres is the setback that the Highway Authority recommend, and as we heard from the applicant, the width here is wide enough for 2 vehicles to be able to pass as they pull in, so there would be some ability. There might be a bit more than a 3-point turn for a vehicle to be able to turn in that access as well.
Would it not be a better solution to say that no gates can be erected, so if anyone goes in there, they can turn around in the property and then come back out?
Unfortunately, Councillor Gaskell, you should really have brought this up before we took the vote. We've taken the vote, we've approved it on the conditions. You're a little bit late, I'm sorry.
I thought the conditions only came in after the vote.
It was after the proposal and after the vote, so you're totally understand your concern, but unfortunately, after the vote, the vote's been taken, it's been approved with the conditions that were recommended, and that's the approval that's gone through. We can't retract that now. Right, item 7, land to the rear of 43 Pelican Road, Pamber, Heath, Tadley. Gemma.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 seeks planning permission for the erection of a detached 4-bedroom dwelling with associated vehicular access on land to the rear of 43 Pelican Road, Pamber, Heath, Tadley. The application site is located within the settlement policy boundary for Tadley. By way of update, it's confirmed that confirmation has been received from the agent and applicant in regard to the recommended conditions contained within the agenda. Members are also advised that the ward members listed on the agenda are wrong and should read as set out on the update paper. The application is recommended for approval. Members are advised that that recommendation for approval is subject to the expiry of the required land ownership notification period, and no new material considerations being raised during that period. And just so members are aware, that notice period expires tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. I've got a speaker down as Miss Russell, but she's quite clearly not here. So, questions to officers? No, I have no questions. So, debate. Councillor Leeks.
I'm quite happy to move recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Leeks. Do we have a seconder? In which case I will second it. It seems to me that it's a continuation of a pattern of development. I can't see any good reason to object to it. Moved and seconded for approval as per the officer's recommendations. Those in favour? Yeah, that's everybody. And Gemma, confirm the recommendation.
Thank you. That application is approved, subject to the conditions listed in the agenda and subject to the expiry of that land notification period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's it for tonight. Hopefully, I will see as many of you as possible on Friday morning. As you all know, it is a very, very contentious